Faith in Real Time with Cece.
And Priscilla, healing while still believing.
Hey, family. Welcome to Faith in Real Time with Cece.
And Priscilla.
We're so glad that you're here with us. If this is your first time listening, we want you to know that this is a safe space. There is no mask here. There is no pressure here. Just real faith for real life.
Yes, Cece, because life is real, and our emotions are real. The trauma is real, and sometimes, the church doesn't even or always talk about, what happens after you say, I believe.
Priscilla, that's so true. So today we're talking about healing while still believing. And I think this is very important because a lot of believers are feeling guilty because they still need to be healed.
Yes, true, and it's like once you give your life to God, people expect you to instantly, to be whole, instantly to be confident or instantly over what has hurt you.
And Priscilla, you know what? You are so right about that. And I want to say this is just not how this works. Salvation is instant, but healing is something altogether different. It's called a journey.
Yes, and that's good, and salvation is instant and healing is a journey.
Yeah, because you can love God, Priscilla. You can deeply love God and still flinch when someone raises their voice. Priscilla, also, you can pray in the spirit and still struggle with trust. You can be worshiping and still be fighting anxiety at the same time.
Yeah, and, Cece, that doesn't mean that you're fake. It means that you're human,
Right.
It means that there are layers that God is still peeling back.
Peeling back. I agree with that. And I think some of the strongest people, Priscilla, are the ones who show up to God while they're still messy, while they're still in their mess. They're not polished. They know that they're not perfect, but they are just present. They just show up because they know that they need God.
Yes, true, Cece. And, and sometimes, the faith isn't loud, Sometimes it's just, showing up. Whether it's, you when you're getting out of bed or you whispering, Jesus, when you don't even have a full prayer.
And that's true. That's real faith in real time, Priscilla. See, I'm not talking about that Instagram faith. I'm not talking about that Sunday morning only faith. But I'm talking about that Tuesday at 2 p.m. when you're triggered faith.
Oh, yeah. And, let's talk about that, Cece.
Okay. So, triggered faith is not a formal biblical term, but spiritually and psychologically, it describes something that's very real, Priscilla. So let me break this down and make it clear. Triggered faith is when a situation activates something in you. So instead of operating in fear, faith kicks in. Your faith is triggered. Because usually when you hear triggered, we think negative. We think trauma. We think emotional reaction. But triggered faith means something totally different. It means something that has hit you. So it could be a tone, a memory, a conversation, and instead of spiraling, you pause.
Yes.
Instead of reacting, you begin to pray. Instead of assuming the worst, you lean into God. And see, that doesn't mean that you don't feel it. It just means fear doesn't get the final say over you. Triggered faith is when your past tries to rise up, but your trust in God rises even higher.
Yes, that's powerful, Cece. It really is.
And that's growth, though, Priscilla. Because there was a time when that same trigger would have taken you out for days. Now it takes you to prayer.
Yes, Cece, that's maturity.
Yes.
It really is.
And healing isn't linear. You can be doing so well, and then all of a sudden something just happens, and it feels like you're back at square one again.
Yes, but you're not back at square one, Cece. You're at a deeper layer.
That's good. I like that. A deeper layer. Yeah.
And sometimes we think, why am I feeling this again? And God is saying, because now, you're ready to heal it.
And that's true. God will sometimes allow something to surface, but not to embarrass you, but because you're finally strong enough to deal with it.
Yes, and see, so, healing, it can be uncomfortable. It can feel like grief, or like anger or like confusion.
And you're so right. But none of those emotions cancel your faith, though. That's the good thing about it.
Mhm. And I think we've been taught that faith, it means that you don't feel anything negative.
Right. See, like if you're really trusting God, Priscilla, people will say that you shouldn't feel sad. I've had people tell me, you shouldn't feel sad. You shouldn't feel disappointed. You shouldn't feel frustrated. Why not? I'm human. I'm in the flesh. When Jesus came down and dwelt among us in the flesh, wasn't he frustrated? Didn't he have feelings?
Yes.
Wasn't he not a God who was touched by the feelings of our infirmities? God understands, and he does.
Yes. But even David, he had moments of deep emotion. He cried, he questioned, and he also wrestled.
And that's true. And see, he was still called a man after God's own heart, regardless. David was still called a man after God's own heart.
So if you're listening, and you feel like I should be further by now, here is clearly, you're not behind.
See, what you have to understand is this: growth isn't measured by how perfect you look. Growth isn't measured by your willingness to, growth is really measured by your willingness to stay surrendered to God.
Yes, and surrendered, see, sometimes it looks like saying, God, I trust you, even though this still hurts.
Exactly. And it's also not rushing yourself, not comparing yourself or your timeline to someone else's highlight reel. You see what I'm saying?
And Cece, comparison is dangerous, especially during healing, because you'll think everyone else is whole, and you're the only one still processing.
And that is so true, Priscilla. But you know what I've noticed? That most people are healing quietly.
Yes. Quiet healing. Their silent battles or their private prayers.
And that's true. And your struggling does not cancel your calling either.
No. You can be anointed and still healing.
And you can be chosen, Priscilla, and still growing.
Right, Cece, and faithful and still figuring things out.
And that is true. And here's something that I want to say. God is not disappointed in you because you're still in process.
And that's so important, Cece.
And it is. See, what you have to understand about God, God is patient, God is kind, and God has said in his word that he is close to the brokenhearted. God is not standing over you with a stopwatch.
Yes, he's walking with you, in real time.
So if you're tired, if you're healing, if you're believing and crying out at the same time, that doesn't mean that you're weak.
No, it means that you're growing.
That's right. Healing doesn't mean you lack faith.
No, that actually means that you're letting God do a deeper work.
A deeper work. I love that, Priscilla. We hope this conversation reminded you that you're not alone.
And that God is with you, not just at the finish line, but in the middle of the process.
So if this podcast blessed you, share it with someone who needs encouragement today. And follow the podcast, leave a review, and join us next time.
Because this is faith.
In real time.